Hello, and welcome to our mini Hungry for History, Water Flows Through the Canal District's History. I'm Luciana Spraker, Director of the City of Savannah's Municipal Archives. As a quick overview, I'm going to touch on a number of historical topics and sites within the Canal District's history and geographical study area that connect to the theme of water. In the mid-1700s, the area stretching from the Savannah River through the Canal District was developed into two plantations by Lachlan McGillivray. Royal Vale, or Vale Royal as it was later known, was north, closer to the river, and Springfield was further south in our study area. McGillivray, a loyalist, abandoned the plantations in 1770, and they were acquired by Joseph Clay, whose total land acquisitions extended from the Savannah River to Ogeechee Road. On the lowlands of Vale Royal, Clay focused on rice cultivation, and on the uplands of Springfield, he planted cotton fields. After Clay's death, Springfield passed to his son-in-law, Joseph Stiles, who concentrated on rice culture. Clay and Stiles' plantations thrived through the forced labor of those enslaved by them. In 1817, concerned about the relation between rice plantations and the frequent outbreaks of yellow fever, the city passed the dry culture law prohibiting wet rice culture within 3 miles of the city limits. However, Joseph Stiles continued to practice wet rice culture on Springfield Plantation. After Stiles' death, the city purchased Springfield Plantation in 1850 and set about draining the land, which was seen as a continuing menace to the health of the community. Over the next 20 years, the city drained the 963-acre tract through the development of the Springfield Canal. Here are a few images to help convey what working on a rice plantation in Georgia was like. The engravings on the left depict rice culture on the Ogeechee near Savannah and were published in Harper's Weekly in 1867. The photograph on the right is of women pounding rice on Sapelo Island around 1915. The drainage of the Canal District and the development of Springfield Canal developed over many years and began with the manipulation of the natural Musgrove Creek, seen here in a map from 1778, outlined in the red box. Musgrove Creek and its branches originally meandered along the western edge of Savannah, draining into the Savannah River. Musgrove Creek was named for Mary Musgrove, a colonial-era trader and interpreter of mixed heritage. She was the daughter of an English trader and a Native American woman, which enabled her to move between both communities. Rice culture developed in this area. The swamps surrounding the creek were diked into fields and small canals. Were diked into fields, and small canals were built by landowners in an effort to control the land. In this map of 1820, you can see the smaller branches of Musgrove Creek have disappeared. By the 1830s, Joseph Stiles had constructed a canal through his property known as Stiles Canal. Musgrove Canal was developed along the northern section, and Minas Canal was near present-day Laurel Grove Cemetery. The smaller planters' canals would later be connected and improved as part of the city's efforts to create Springfield Canal in the 1850s and 1860s. The city thought it was done with its work in 1870, but with the yellow fever epidemic of 1876, the city refocused attention back on drainage on the west side and continued improvements to the Springfield Canal. In 1915, the northern part of the Springfield Canal was diverted into the Savannah and Ogeechee Canal north of Louisville Road to permit industrial development, with the northern mouth of the canal filled in. Here are all three of those maps together. Agricultural and industrial development and continual growth of Savannah can be blamed, first for the loss of nature's Musgrove Creek, and then for a deletion of a large portion of the man-made Springfield Canal. In the 1820s, canal fever hit the nation, sparked by New York's Erie Canal, which represented an economic boom and a major technology jump in transportation. In 1824, the Georgia state legislation granted Ebenezer Jenks a charter for a canal between the Savannah and Ogeechee rivers. The following year, the charter was extended to include a section from Ogeechee to the Altamaha River. The stated purpose of the canal was to support transportation and strengthen the port of Savannah. The Savannah, Ogeechee, and Altamaha Canal Company was incorporated in 1826 to raise money and build the canal. The company relied on local planters who owned land along the canal for their enslaved labor force. The peak of the labor force was in March 1827 with 577 workers, mostly local enslaved and Irish immigrant laborers. They cleaned the canalway, built up the embankments, and constructed the canal locks. The 16.5-mile section from the Savannah River to the Ogeechee River was completed in December 1830 at a cost of approximately $189,500. The first barge that traveled the canal was loaded with 50 tons of wood and bricks for the Springfield plantation. The average barge measured 85 feet by 17 feet and carried 50 tons of cargo. The barges were propelled by horses or mules traveling the towpaths. The canal was never wildly successful and had a slow decline, with the final blow coming in 1888 when the Central of Georgia Railroad made a large stock purchase in the canal company. In this slide, I wanted to demonstrate how people interacted with the Savannah-Ogeechee Canal some. On the upper left is a boy sitting on the towpath. On the lower left is a barge on the canal. On the lower right is a baptism in a canal. That might be the Savannah-Ogeechee Canal, but it's not clearly identified. But it gives you an idea of what a baptism might have looked like. The ordinance shown here is Savannah City Ordinance from 1857, which outlawed swimming and bathing in the canal between Lock 2 and the river between 7 a.m. and sunset, which meant after sunset and until 7 a.m. you could do those things. You could swim and bathe in the Savannah-Ogeechee Canal. The Brickyard neighborhood developed along the Savannah-Ogeechee Canal. Today, the boundaries of this neighborhood are Louisville Road on the north, Pritchard Street on the east, the Savannah-Ogeechee Canal on the south, and Stiles Avenue on the west. Joseph Stiles developed a brickyard in this area as early as 1819. And you see from the map in the upper left that timber basins were developed off of the canal here. This area also saw a lumber mill in the 1840s and a brick plant in the 1850s, all of which would have taken advantage of the basins in the canal for storing and transporting goods to the Savannah port. The Brickyard area was brought into the city limits in 1854. The Central of Georgia Railroad constructed 2 brick railroad viaducts over the Savannah and Ogeechee Canal just north of Louisville Road. The viaducts, listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1978, carried trains over the canal and an adjacent road, West Boundary Street. Both viaducts are believed to have been designed by architects Muller and Schwab and built with the oversight of Mason Benjamin F. Armstrong, likely using enslaved labor during construction. The mainline viaduct was built in 1853 and is just north of Louisville Road. The 4 arches of this 200-foot-long viaduct are constructed of Savannah gray brick, with spans of 35 feet between piers, and support a deck 38 feet wide. The Juilliard Viaduct, built in 1860, about 400 feet north of the main line, consists of 4 shallow segmental arches, with spans of 60 feet from center to center of the piers. It supports a deck 31 feet wide. Both viaducts exhibit high-quality masonry work with decorative cornices and details. In 1890, civil engineer Thomas T. Johnston of Chicago recommended the city construct a new water plant to meet the increasing demands of Savannah. The following year, City Council approved the construction of a new waterworks and selected the site at the intersection of Gwinnett Street and Stiles Avenue. Work began in May 1891, and construction included the pump house with boiler and engine rooms and a 118-foot-high chimney. The building features red pressed brick with granite and terracotta trimmings, with motifs reflecting water functions, like the lion symbol of Venice, and cattails and marsh vegetation. The waterworks were fully functional in March 1893 and cost about $410,000 for the entire system. The grounds surrounding the pump house were landscaped and improved with drives, walks, plants, shrubbery, and an ornamental fountain. In 1938, the city completed construction of a field lab for malaria research on the city lot site near the Waterworks building, with the assistance of Works Progress Administration funds. The lab was named for Henry Rose Carter, former Assistant Surgeon General for the U.S. Public Health Service, who had discovered the extrinsic incubation period for yellow fever in 1898. The building was leased to the U.S. Public Health Service and during World War II, used by the agency malaria control in war areas for testing. They conducted mosquito breeding in the basement and used the specimens for testing. Malaria control in war areas evolved in 1946 into the Communicable Disease Center, now known as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC. The location of this building, its naming for a major figure in yellow fever history, and its purpose for testing mosquitoes in an area once identified as a city. The location of this building, its naming for a major figure in yellow fever history, and its purpose for testing mosquitoes in an area once identified as a threat to the city population and yellow fever outbreaks stuck out to me. And along those same lines, I must point out additional public health testing that occurred in the area, this time without knowledge of the local community. Carver Village is a subdivision started in 1947, specifically as housing for the African American and Black community of Savannah. In the 1950s, the U.S. Army Chemical Corps, out of Fort Detrick, Maryland, undertook a series of biological warfare studies in Georgia, Florida, and Utah to determine the effectiveness of using mosquitoes as a vector to spread biological weapons to enemies, particularly yellow fever to Russians. 2 secret operations were conducted in Georgia. In 1955, Operation Big Buzz involved dispersing 330,000 mosquitoes from E-14 munitions dropped from aircraft at targets with human volunteers at regular intervals. This was done at nearby Harris Neck Airfield and Lina Plantation. While volunteers were used, the insects of course spread and bit unsuspecting victims as well. Operation Mayday was conducted from April to November 1956 and involved ground-level dispersal in the Carver Village area. This time the public and local governments were not notified, but those involved in the tests went around and asked to measure with baits mosquitoes and how many bites people had. What they failed to do was tell people what was going on and who they were with. Most assumed they were just with the health department and did not know there had been a release of mosquitoes. The Chemical Corps had released uninfected female Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, the yellow fever carrier. While they did not have yellow fever, there are still reports of individuals that were swarmed and got sick from the insect bites. So in closing, and as food for thought, the themes that ran through the topics we touched on today are public health, drainage, transportation, economy, industry, technology, and social. I also thought there was a pull between nature versus man, including the controlling of the flow of water either for cultivation, transportation, drainage, or public health, man working the land, whether working plantations or building canals and bridges, the natural environment versus the built environment, and the evolution of the topography of the land. This is just a small taste of the rich history of the Canal District, and the Municipal Archives looks forward to bringing you more about this area of the city in the future. Have a great day, and we'll see you at our next Hungry for History.